Welcome to the Health Headliner podcast by Tudu Digital. Our content is informational only and not medical advice. Please consult your provider. Now, let's dive into today's headlines.
Okay, let's dive in. Think about this for a second. If you're managing a chronic health condition, maybe something like schizophrenia or hypertension, even asthma,
Right,
you often need medication every single day
right.
without fail. And that daily routine, it sounds simple, but remembering that pill day after day,
Mhm.
it can be a huge challenge for a lot of people.
Oh, absolutely. It's a massive issue because consistency is just so vital, isn't it? Especially for conditions where missing even one dose can have, well, pretty serious consequences. It really undermines the whole treatment.
Exactly. Forgetting isn't just, an oops moment.
Yeah.
It can be a real setback.
Yeah.
So what if we could change that dynamic? What if you didn't need to remember every day?
Like less often.
Yeah, much less often, like say once a week. That's what this deep dive is all about. We're looking at some fascinating new research into a potential solution, basically, a new kind of pill.
A once-a-week pill. And we've been looking at a couple of really interesting sources for this. There's a great overview article from MIT News, which explains the tech. And then there's the detailed scientific paper itself, published in the Lancet Psychiatry. That gives us the nitty-gritty on a recent clinical trial.
Right. So our mission here is to unpack this, pull out the key insights from both sources, figure out what this new approach is and what it might mean. And the core idea, it's kind of mind-bending at first.
It is pretty innovative.
It's a pill you take just once a week.
Yeah.
But it releases the medication steadily all week long from inside your stomach.
Yeah, the visual they describe is striking. It starts off looking like a normal capsule, maybe the size of a multivitamin.
Okay.
You swallow it. But once it's in your stomach, it actually unfolds. It opens up into this star shape.
A star shape inside your stomach.
Exactly. And that shape is key. It's not just random. It's engineered to work with your body in a very specific way.
Okay, you have my attention. Let's get into the study they did. Based on these sources, what was the main goal? Why develop this?
Well, the driving force behind the research and the specific trial was pretty clear. Could this new weekly pill actually work? Could it deliver a steady, consistent level of medication over the entire 7 days?
Compared to taking a pill every day.
Right. They wanted to see if it could keep the drug levels stable in the body and, crucially, manage patient symptoms effectively. They focused on schizophrenia for this particular trial, and a huge motivator mentioned by one of the MIT researchers, Giovanni Traverso, was improving adherence.
Making it easier to stick to the medication plan.
Precisely. Especially for conditions where maybe because of the illness itself or just, life getting in the way, remembering that daily pill is really tough.
Okay, so tell us more about this star shape. How on earth does a pill stay in your stomach for a whole week and release a drug slowly? That sounds like some serious bioengineering.
It really is quite clever. The sources break down the mechanism, so you swallow the capsule, it goes down into your stomach like any other pill.
Standard stuff so far.
Yeah, but then the outer shell dissolves, and inside is this folded-up device. It's made of special polymers.
Okay.
Once that shell is gone, this device expands. It unfolds into that star shape. The sources say it has 6 arms, specifically.
6 arms, okay.
Now, here's the ingenious part. Once it's unfolded, that star structure is flexible, but it's just too large to pass through the opening at the bottom of your stomach. That opening is called the pylorus. It leads to the small intestine.
Ah, so it's physically blocked from leaving.
Basically, yeah. It's designed to be retained in the stomach. And while it sits there, the medication which is embedded within the material of those 6 arms is slowly released, continuously, over about 7 days.
Wow. Okay, but then what? Does it just stay there forever? That sounds problematic.
No, that's the other clever bit of the design. It's not meant to be permanent. The material itself is designed to break down. After about a week or so in the stomach's environment, it starts to degrade. The arms eventually break off from the central core, and these smaller pieces are small enough to pass through the pylorus. They then travel safely through the rest of your digestive system and are eliminated naturally, so it's a temporary resident.
That makes a lot more sense. Really fascinating design.
Mm-hmm.
So what specific drug did they use to test this delivery system in the trial described in the Lancet Psychiatry paper?
They used a medication called risperidone.
Risperidone. Okay.
Yeah, it's a very common antipsychotic medication used to manage symptoms of schizophrenia. Usually, if you take risperidone orally, it's a pill you take once a day.
Right.
The sources do mention there are also long-acting injectable versions of risperidone, shots given every 2 weeks or even every couple of months.
Okay, so less frequent options exist, but they're injections.
Exactly. And some patients prefer not to get injections or maybe find it hard to get to a clinic regularly. So this weekly oral pill offers a potential alternative. Same drug, different delivery method, trying to find that middle ground for adherence and preference.
Got it. Let's dig into the trial itself then. The Lancet Psychiatry paper. What kind of study was it? Who took part?
Okay, so this was what's called a phase 3 clinical trial. Phase 3 trials are usually larger studies done later in the development process. They're really looking to confirm if the drug works effectively and safely in a larger group before, potentially asking for approval from regulatory bodies.
Like the Food and Drug Administration here in the U.S.
Exactly. Now, this specific trial was described as open label and non-randomized.
Okay, let's break those down. Open label. What does that mean for you and me?
Open label just means everyone involved knew what treatment the participants were getting. Both the researchers and the participants knew they were taking the new weekly pill. There was no placebo, no blinding.
And non-randomized.
That means participants weren't randomly assigned to different groups. Basically, everyone who participated and met the criteria was put into the group receiving the weekly risperidone pill. They did compare the results to historical data from daily dosing, though, and had a short daily dosing period at the start.
Okay, so not a direct head-to-head comparison group within this specific study design for the main measurements. Who were the people in the trial?
They enrolled 83 participants. These were adults diagnosed with schizophrenia or schizoaffective disorder who were considered clinically stable on their current treatment. The study ran across 5 different locations in the United States.
And the demographics.
The paper gives some details. 62 were male, 21 were female. And it noted that 67 participants identified as Black or African American. The average age was around 49. Each person was in the study for about 5 weeks in total.
And you mentioned they started with a daily pill.
Yeah, just briefly. For about a week before starting the weekly pill, they took the standard, immediate-release risperidone daily, like a run-in period. The paper calls the weekly pill LYN-005. The doses were adjusted higher for the weekly pill to match the total weekly dose of the daily one.
Makes sense. So they got the weekly pill. What were the researchers actually measuring? How did they know if it was working?
They looked primarily at 2 main things. First, and this was a key focus, they measured pharmacokinetic parameters.
Okay, pharmacokinetics. That's about how the drug moves through the body, right?
Exactly. How it's absorbed, distributed, metabolized, eliminated. They took blood samples each week and measured the concentration of risperidone. They were especially interested in the lowest level before the next dose, the peak level after taking the pill, and the average level over the whole week.
C, min, C max, CAG.
Yep, those metrics. And they compared the levels they saw with the weekly pill to what you'd expect to see with daily dosing.
Okay, that covers the drug levels. What was the second thing they measured?
Clinical stability. Basically, were the participants' schizophrenia symptoms staying well managed? They used a standard assessment tool for this. It's called the Positive and Negative Syndrome Scale.
The Positive and Negative Syndrome Scale.
Sure.
Quite a mouthful.
It is. People often just call it the PAN-SS. Clinicians use it to rate the severity of both positive symptoms, things like hallucinations or delusions, and negative symptoms like emotional withdrawal or lack of motivation. So, tracking their scores on this scale showed whether the weekly pill was keeping their condition under control.
All right, the moment of truth. What did they find? Let's start with those drug levels, the pharmacokinetics.
This was a really crucial finding, highlighted in both the MIT piece and the Lancet paper. The weekly pill did successfully provide sustained release of risperidone over the entire week.
So it worked as designed.
It seems so. The specific data in the Lancet paper showed that those key metrics, the minimum concentration, the maximum concentration, and the average concentration, all met the targets they had set beforehand when compared against what's expected from daily immediate-release risperidone.
So it wasn't just releasing some drug. It maintained the levels within that target therapeutic range consistently.
That's the key takeaway. And the MIT news article pointed out something else interesting from the study. There appeared to be less variability, less fluctuation in the drug levels with the weekly pill, compared to the peaks and troughs you typically see with daily dosing.
Smoother levels.
Yeah, potentially smoother. Staying more consistently within that desired range could, in theory, lead to more stable symptom control.
Okay, so did it translate? Did those steady drug levels actually keep symptoms in check? What about the clinical stability?
Yes, the findings on that front were also positive. The participants generally remained clinically stable throughout the study. Their scores on that positive and negative syndrome scale didn't significantly change, indicating the weekly dose was effective in managing their symptoms during the trial period.
That's significant.
It really is. And one of the study authors, Leslie Citro, made a really important point about this. He emphasized how difficult consistent medication adherence can be in chronic mental illness. Having a weekly oral option that maintains efficacy could be a huge help. It could potentially prevent relapses, reduce hospitalizations, just improve overall management.
Makes perfect sense. But the safety aspect,
Mm.
keeping this device in your stomach for a week, were there any major side effects or problems?
Well, the sources reported that the side effects observed were generally minimal and mostly consistent with what's already known about risperidone itself.
Raw.
The most common issues fell under the umbrella of gastrointestinal treatment-emergent adverse events.
Okay, treatment-emergent adverse events.
Yeah.
That just means anything that happened while they were taking the treatment, right? Not necessarily caused by it.
Exactly. It's anything reported during that time.
Ah.
And in this case, the most frequent were related to the digestive system. The Lancet paper got specific. 44 out of 67 participants in their analysis group reported something. Mostly it was things like mild acid reflux or constipation.
Bowel duct.
And importantly, these tended to occur early in the study and usually didn't last long. The paper did note one serious treatment-emergent adverse event occurred, which is always tracked, but overall, the safety profile seemed pretty manageable, with no major unexpected red flags related to the delivery system itself.
Okay, so the technology seems feasible. The drug delivery worked in this trial. Side effects were mostly mild. What are the bigger picture implications here? Beyond this one study, this one drug.
I think this is where it gets really exciting. The potential impact on medication adherence is probably the #1 thing.
Right.
For conditions like schizophrenia, where cognitive challenges can make daily routines hard, or even for something totally different, like, say, high blood pressure, where people might just forget amidst a busy life. Having a system that delivers the drug consistently with much less frequent dosing, that could be revolutionary for ensuring people actually get the medicine they need. Giovanni Traverso from MIT really emphasized that making it easier to get sustained drug levels.
And it also offers more choice for patients, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Leslie Citrum highlighted that too. We mentioned the injectable options, but not everyone wants them or can easily get them. An effective weekly oral option is a significant addition to the toolkit. It respects patient preference.
And better adherence usually means better outcomes.
That's the bottom line, isn't it?
Yeah.
Across almost any chronic condition, if you improve adherence, you tend to see fewer complications, fewer hospital visits, better quality of life. It's a direct link.
So is this star capsule technology just for risperidone? Or could we see it used for other medications, other conditions down the line?
This is where the potential really broadens out. The researchers, like Traverso, stress that the underlying technology platform is adaptable. It's not just a one-trick pony for risperidone.
Okay.
The sources explicitly state they're already planning or preparing for trials using the same star capsule concept to deliver completely different drugs.
Like what?
Contraceptives were mentioned as a specific example. Imagine a once-a-week or maybe even less frequent oral contraceptive pill. That could also have a massive impact on adherence and effectiveness.
Wow. So it's less about the specific drug and more about a new way to deliver drugs that need steady levels over time.
Precisely. It's a platform technology. Robert Langer, another key figure at MIT involved in the original invention, apparently expressed how gratifying it was to see this concept, developed years ago, reach this advanced stage of clinical testing. It shows that long-term vision paying off.
Of course, with any research, especially early-stage findings, we need to talk about limitations. What caveats did the sources mention about this study?
Yeah, it's crucial to keep perspective. We touched on the study design phase 3, but open label and non-randomized.
Right.
So while it gave good data on pharmacokinetics and initial safety and showed symptom stability, you can't make definitive claims about how it compares clinically against other treatments just from this single study setup. You typically need larger randomized controlled trials for that head-to-head comparison.
That makes sense. Anything else?
While they also noted participant completion. While 83 people enrolled, only 47 actually completed the full 5 weeks of the study. That level of dropout isn't necessarily unusual in trials like this, but it's something researchers have to consider when analyzing the results.
And there was one other specific limitation mentioned in the Lancet Psychiatry paper, right? Something about the design process itself.
Yes, and it's an important point about modern research practice. The paper explicitly stated, and I quote loosely here, that no people with lived experience were involved in the study design.
Meaning patients weren't consulted when planning the trial.
Exactly, and they flagged this as a limitation. There's a growing understanding that involving patients, the people who will actually use the treatment in the design process, is really important. It helps ensure the research asks the right questions, measures outcomes that matter to patients, and considers practical aspects like convenience or side effect tolerance from their perspective.
That's a really valuable point. So looking forward then, what happens next with this weekly risperidone pill and the STAR capsule technology in general?
The sources indicate the next steps involve conducting larger, perhaps longer, phase 3 trials for the weekly risperidone formulation. That's typically needed before the company could submit everything to the Food and Drug Administration, the FDA, for review and potential approval.
And the other drugs.
They're moving forward with those plans too. Testing this delivery platform with other medications, like the contraceptives we mentioned, seems to be a key part of their strategy, expanding the potential applications.
You know, this whole deep dive really underscores how sometimes tackling a seemingly simple problem, like remembering to take a pill, can lead to incredibly complex and innovative science.
It absolutely does. The engineering, the biology, the clinical testing, all focused on making that daily task less burdensome.
And it really leaves us with something powerful to think about, doesn't it? This technology, if it proves successful and safe in further trials, isn't just about one drug for one condition.
No, it represents a potential shift in how we approach managing many chronic illnesses. Making adherence easier could fundamentally change outcomes.
So the thought to leave you with is this. What other chronic conditions out there could dramatically benefit from a reliable, once-a-week oral medication? Think about things like HIV, diabetes, maybe even certain types of pain management. What could the ripple effects be for patient independence, for easing the load on healthcare systems, for simply improving the day-to-day reality of living with a long-term health challenge? It's a fascinating glimpse into a possible future of medicine.
Thanks for tuning in to the Health Headliner podcast by To Digital. Like and subscribe for more health news and breakthroughs. Stay healthy and informed. See you next time.